Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Amanda Kate, who's the author of Divine, Messy Human. Amanda, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. Looking forward to the conversation. So, before we get started, though, just give my listeners a little introduction of who Amanda Kate is.
So, it's so funny that question, isn't it? You sort of go, "Oh God, who am I?" it gets overwhelming at times. But no, I am a partner, a mother, a dog mum. I live in Melbourne, Australia. It's early morning here, and my puppy is waiting to go for a walk. I had a pretty, reasonable kind of childhood. I was born in Perth in Australia and grew up in Adelaide. And then I spent 11 years in the UK, and it's coming up for 11 years now in Melbourne. So I kind of consider myself of no fixed address, a bit of a gypsy at heart. So still don't know where home is post Melbourne. But I figure that bit'll come. I love the fact that you're living in an RV because there's a bit of me going, I'm so jealous right now.
Yeah, maybe that's where the next home will be for you if you got that gypsy heart. The
Oh, I
RV will
tell you.
definitely feed a gypsy heart without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, no. And I guess what kind of started me on the path I'm on is I got quite sick in around 2012, 2013. I was needing 3 hour naps in the afternoon, and I guess didn't know why. All the doctors thought I was the healthiest sick person they'd seen, and they had no clue. And it took a number of natural therapists to basically tell me I had chronic fatigue. And that's really what started me on my path through natural therapies and alternative healing modalities. And it's actually been a really empowering, beautiful journey in so many ways. As painful and as hard as it is, I guess sometimes they are the paths that you end up walking. That give you so much value and so much wonder in your life. It has really found a deep sense of spirituality for myself. It has found a deep sense of who I am. Prior to getting chronic fatigue, I didn't treat myself well, which is part of the reason you get something like that. It's long term emotional trauma, psychological trauma, all that sort of stuff. So, finding that sense of, you know what, I actually really have to start looking after myself now, or the rest of my life isn't going to be too great. And I was, I guess, in my early 30s around that time. And you don't want to look at the fact that you may have 60, 70 years to go. And this is where you're at now. So it really made me take stock of where I was at and make some big, big changes, put in some really tough, loving boundaries, and learn how to love myself because that was something very alien to me at the time. So, yeah, it was pretty amazing.
So, tell me a little bit about, just in today's day and age, it seems to be um, we love throwing pharmaceuticals at every problem that we have. Um, that doesn't seem to be the case in you. That's not what you did. So tell me a little bit about kind of breaking that mindset of the fact that we live in this society that here's a pill for every ailment you have. Here's a pill for
Yeah.
every ailment you have, and then we kind of forget that all those pills also come with a whole bucket load of side effects that aren't necessarily good for for the rest of what's
Yeah.
going on in our body. So how did you break that um, mindset of you know getting out of the societal norm of like, hey, just throw medicine at whatever's ailing you, and if you take 70 pills every morning, good for you.
Yeah, do you know it's a really strange one. It actually, to be truth, was not a conscious choice. And I what actually tipped me on that natural healing journey was I was suffering for 13 days a month with my menstrual cycle. So I'd have 6 days in the middle of the month when I was ovulating that I was in agony, I was grumpy, I just things were not right, and I was I was in a really bad way. And then 7 days, when I was actually in my bleed part of the cycle where I was also suffering. And I was like, this just isn't normal. And I went to go and see a gynecologist, and they basically said to me, here's some antidepressants. I'm going, antidepressants are not going to help me sort out my menstrual cycle. There was something just so fundamentally screwy about that. And he's like, oh, well, I guess it's the same way that we don't use the pill just for, regulating periods. It can be for skin problems and all this. And there was just these alarm bells going off for me. Anyway, I filled the script and I took maybe 2 or 3 days of them. And I was like, every time I took one, I was like, this just does not fundamentally feel like it's going to do what I want it to do. So anyway, I stopped taking them. And that's really when I went to go and see a naturopath, because I went, you know what, there has to be another answer to this. And it took another few years, actually. It was quite fascinating. But I started seeing a naturopath. I then saw a chiropractor. I started seeing a Chinese doctor who did cupping and acupuncture, as well as the Chinese herbs. And she was the first one who actually said, "You've got chronic fatigue here. That's actually your problem. It wasn't about the menstrual issue at all." Because the thing is, when you're in long-term adrenal stress, your sex organs, your gonads, and your ovaries start helping your adrenals make the stress hormones that you're needing to keep up supply. It's like, getting another factory to help out if you're, if you're running a bit slow on things. And so my reproductive system was actually trying to help my body create the stress hormones that I needed, which now that I know that makes absolute sense. But obviously at the time I was like, I just don't understand why this part's not working. And so it was through all these modalities that I was like, I'm starting to actually get answers. One of the big ones came, I went through quite a traumatic event, and I came back from this family holiday basically like an empty shell of a human being. My ex-husband had quite a rant at me for about 4 hours, ripping me to shreds and telling me exactly what was wrong with me. Which was pretty difficult to hear after so long of, trying to be the perfect wife and the perfect mother and, just trying so damn hard. And I went to go and get a mental health care plan because, of course, I thought I was broken. There was something wrong with me. I needed to fix myself. And I went to see this psychologist. I rang up to make an appointment, and they couldn't get me in for her for 4 to 6 weeks, and they couldn't book me into her mindfulness course for another about the same. It was, a week or so either side of the session. And so I got myself on that list and I booked in, and the receptionist said to me, so, you do sound quite stressed. Can you just give me an overview of what's going on? So I gave the socially acceptable one, which was that we just moved to Australia. My ex-husband hated his job, or my husband at the time hated his job, was getting used to living away from his family, that my daughter was struggling and having up to 4-hour tantrums, that my son was being bullied at school. And she sort of said to me, so who's got your back? And that was the question that floored me, because it was like an inverted house of cards, and I was the one carrying everything. And I knew if I fell, and I had fallen, that everything was going to come crashing down. And she said, okay, we've got a kinesiologist on staff, or we've got a Reiki professional. Who would you would you like to see one of them, because they can really help with your stress? And I'd had a bit of a strange experience with a Reiki practitioner before. So I went, look, I'm willing to try anything. I don't know what kinesiology is, but bring it on. I'll book in. I'll have a session. And in that session, one of the first things I said to her, and we still laugh about it because she became my teacher when I was training. We laugh at the fact that in the first session I sat down and I said, I need to fix myself because I'm so broken. If I don't fix myself, I'm going to lose my marriage. Little did I know I was going to lose my marriage anyway, and fixing myself was just, not that I was ever broken, by the way, and I don't think anybody is ever broken. We are exactly where we need to be on our path at the time to do the learning we need to. But, at the time I said, I need to fix myself to save my marriage. And she said to me in one of the sessions when something had come up, she said, "You don't understand how emotionally abused you are, do you?" And a number of my major relationships kind of, it made sense. I was like, oh my God, that person and that person and this person. And it took me 4 months to actually work out, I guess who was the main one that I was accepting this from. And I'm not saying I was an angel by any stretch. When you're in that kind of situation, you certainly fight fire with fire. And it wasn't their fault either. They were dealing with their own conditioning and their own life and their own, perception lenses that they looked at things through. So, there's certainly no fault or blame there, but it wasn't healthy for either of us. And in finding that, it was like my whole life started to change. I started to understand myself at a deeper level. I started to understand what got me to that situation, why I allowed it to happen in so many ways. And also, I think the hardest realization came when I realized that I was actually my biggest abuser, that my internal self-talk told me that I didn't deserve any better than what I had, that was the maximum of what I deserved. And if anything, I probably thought I deserved worse. Now, as that started to shift, I started to go, hang on, do I deserve this? And I started asking those questions. And that changed absolutely everything. Because, of course, then you get a point where you're like, huh, maybe this isn't what I want. Maybe this isn't what I deserve. Maybe we can do different. Maybe we can do better. So yeah, it was quite a fascinating journey, and the biggest thing it's given me is actually that knowledge of self.
Right. Yeah, which I think is so important nowadays, and it's still something that gets overlooked. And it seems to be a conversation that's come up quite a bit on some of my recent
Mm.
podcasts. Is just self care, and being selfish is sometimes you know one of the best things you can do is carving out that time for yourself and time for you to heal. You can't give from an empty cup.
Mm.
So you got to take that time to really you know find the balance and give back to yourself. So you said it was kind of a 4 month process for you,
That was
but
to realize, and then it
right,
was another process to
yeah,
actually make a decision to go.
yeah, and probably still a daily process today to continue to train yourself to go
Yeah,
through it. So,
yeah.
for somebody out there who's trying to figure out how to take care of themselves, I mean, what is some of the best advice that you can give them?
Well, the first thing I actually want to talk about is that idea of selfishness. So, you know, we are trained, especially as women, to be selfless, to give of ourselves for everybody else. And the more selfless we are, the better we are. And when you have children, oh my God, certainly don't put yourself first. Your children are the be all and end all. And although that's not verbally said, it is certainly lived in society. So it's
Mhm.
it's quite a fascinating idea, but selfless does exactly what it says on the tin. It makes less and less and less and less of ourselves. And what happens is we end up going into these resentment spirals of that, why is it always me that has to do that? It's not fair, blah, 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 blah. And we get into that really quite negative self-talk. Now, resentment, interestingly, belongs to the envy family. So often what we're actually doing is we're looking at everybody else going, I actually want to be the person sitting there, playing their computer or, going out with their mates or going to the gym or whatever. But here I am, you know, doing all this stuff for everybody else that actually doesn't serve me. So we go into these resentment spirals and start to feel envious of where other people are because they don't have as much responsibility. And we do end up making less and less and less of ourselves to try and please other people because as I now know, which I didn't know before, people pleasing is a pointless task. We are never going to make other people happy.
Yeah.
It is. And what we're doing when we're trying to please people is we're putting them up on a pedestal and making them more important than ourselves. So already we then make ourselves inferior just simply by the fact that we're making them above us in terms of you deserve to be pleased. And that imbalance is never going to create an equal relationship. So selflessness is one of those things that I do like to speak to because so so many times it's so deeply conditioned that we don't even realize how screwed up it is. On the other hand, selfishness, I used to think was selfishness was when you did something that hurt somebody else. But I was listening to this talk by Abraham Hicks on YouTube, and they're a channel that bring through messages from this group of beings called Abraham, and they're a spiritual teacher. And what they said, it was one of those, I had it on in the background and it stopped me in my tracks and I went, whoa, and I had to rewind it. And I'm like, something jumped out of that. And they said, selfishness does not exist. You think of all the times you've been called selfish. Who is calling you selfish? It is somebody who wants something from you or wants you to do something for them that you don't have the capacity to do or you don't have the desire to do. So, in that instance, it is actually the person calling you selfish who is being selfish,
Right.
which blew my mind. I was like, whoa, okay. Now, that has allowed me to not just realize when other people have called me selfish that I've taken it on and I've then gone down the complete opposite end of this pendulum and I have become more and more selfless to prove how unselfish I am. But there is also this healthy middle ground, which is what you were talking about, which is being self full, allowing ourselves to fill our cup, allowing ourselves to receive from other people when they offer to do things for us, allowing us to ask for help, allowing us to receive the help that we want. And so there's this beautiful middle ground that doesn't put us into that selfishness and it doesn't put us into selflessness. And we can have those healthy boundaries where it may not be a no, it might just be, well, I can't do that right now because I don't have the capacity to do it. It could be, actually, that doesn't feel good for me. That doesn't sit with my values or my capacity. So it's a no. It can be us making a healthy decision that serves us. And I think that is actually a really, really important part of the conversation. The second part is that self-talk, recognizing what we say to ourselves in our head.
Yeah.
I often say, and I think I've got it in my book, that if you imagine your self-talk being broadcast from a speaker above your head and walking around the streets, if you're happy for everybody else to hear what's going on, then your self-talk is impeccable and don't do anything to change it. Most of us would hide our heads in shame and go, holy crap, because we wouldn't dare speak to anybody else, especially not somebody we loved, with that kind of self-talk. There's no way. When I was in the worst of my self-hatred, and I used to walk into rooms and want to smash a mirror because I couldn't bear the sight of myself, that self-talk that I had, there is no way I would have said that to any other human being ever.
Yeah.
And yet I found it absolutely fine to beat myself up in that way and say those disgustingly horrible things to myself. Now, the only person that we have is ourselves, really, in this world.
Yeah. We come in alone and we go out alone. No getting
Exactly.
around it.
Exactly. And that is therefore the most important relationship. And I remember somebody telling me when I first had children, the priority level goes you, then your husband, and then your children. Now, what I did was I put everybody else above me, and I was the bottom rung. And it was interesting, actually, after I started on this journey. It was just after I met my partner, so about 4 years ago now. And my daughter was, in one of those early teens moods where she was like, you love your new partner more than us, and it's not fair, and we're losing you, all of that sort of stuff. And I said to her, no. I said, that's actually completely untrue. I said, you and your brother are the most important thing to me. And she turned around and she went, no, we're not. You are. And I had a laugh. I just went, do you know what, honey? You are absolutely right. And thank you so much for reminding me, because I should be, and I am the most important person in my life. But you and your brother come a very close second, because if I'm okay, then I will look after you the best I can. And my partner's actually separate from that equation. He is part of me looking after me. But you two gain all of the benefit from me looking after me. And therefore you gain the benefit from me feeling loved and giving love to this person because you're going to get a richer experience of me in the process. And it was such a beautiful reminder, one, that she was watching and that she was listening to some of the messages about me knowing how important I was. And two, I got the confirmation that she's seeing this, which means that as she grows up, she's going to be able to give herself that same permission to love herself, the same permission to look after herself, to give herself the time she needs to heal when she needs time to heal. And that was beautiful. That was such a, just as much as she was, trying for the fight and, trying to be a bit cheeky and all the rest of it, it was, like I say, the best thing that could have happened.
That's awesome. So after you went through this process,
Mm.
um, what was it that then inspired you to go on and write the book and become a coach and a kinesiologist yourself?
Well, it was funny. The kinesiology thing, like I say, I found that about 8 months ish before I left my marriage. And I was blown away with the changes in myself. So even though I was still in a toxic relationship, I was finding myself doing things I'd never done before. I found myself asking myself questions and starting to understand what I loved, what I needed. It was mind blowing because it was almost the thing that gave me permission to do that. And kinesiology is a bit different in the US. For you guys, kinesiology is more about the applied kinesiology, the movement of kinesiology, which it is also taught over here as well. But the kinesiology I do is much more vibrational medicine, somatic therapy, where we are removing the stress from the body. So it's along the lines of Reiki, hypnotherapy, some EMDR, EFT tapping. It's along that line where we're really looking at the emotional resonance that's sitting under the surface and creating the stress. So we're not looking for your symptoms. Realistically, your symptoms will be a bit of a guidepost to what's going on and what systems are involved within the body. But when I work with a client, what I'm looking for is, when did it all start? What was that first seed that got planted? And we go back to that moment. We clear the emotional stress from that. So it's like pulling the weed out by the root so it can't regrow. And in doing that, I was just starting to understand myself. And that was the biggest key I could have gotten. Within 6 months, I was sitting in the classroom learning how to become a kinesiologist, because it was, I just thought, if I can help one person the way this has helped me, I'll have lived a good life. And so that really started it. And once I started learning, oh my God, it was like the more I knew, the more I realized I didn't know, and the more I wanted to know. And so
Right.
I threw myself knee deep into everything I could learn. I think in 2017, I did the equivalent of 26 weekends of school, um, because I started my advanced diploma before I finished my diploma. Which isn't normal. We don't usually do that. But I was just wanting to jump in, and I did some advanced quantum neurology. I did advanced hormones and glands workshops. I did advanced techniques. I did total body modification, which is another form of kinesiology. Like, I just threw myself into it because it just blew my mind the way this stuff works. And working in that quantum healing field is just amazing. The human body is just phenomenal. And so that really kind of led me into, and I knew what I was clearing. So in every school weekend, every technique, we are practicing as the practitioner, and we're also getting practiced on as the client. So every technique we're having done on us, and you're getting these realizations of, oh my God, that's what's creating this issue. And oh my God, that's the block that's sitting there. And it's just, every time you're like, mind blown. Like, more people need to know about this stuff. And then obviously I started working in it at the end of 2016. So after my first year of study, I started doing paid sessions, and I'd start seeing some of those changes for my clients. And I was like, huh, okay, so this wasn't just a me thing. This is,
Right.
bigger. And that really led on to it. And then during that year, my girlfriend did this archetypal life coaching, and we were both doing some work with archetypes at the time, and we were, having this big chat, and she's like, come and do it with me. And I'm going, realistically, with this workload, I cannot do it now. So that's why it sort of waited until 2020 when we were in lockdowns for me to actually do that study. But it fits so well with it because it's understanding, I guess, the pinnacle of human experience, which obviously we're not at. We're not Jesus in this lifetime, as I say, but it's about understanding that pinnacle of humanity and where we can be, and therefore working with those bits that are out of balance as well. So it does dovetail really well into kinesiology. And the book came out of my, gosh, it must be 6 or 7 years of studying kinesiology, of my own journey of what techniques and tools helped me develop and change, what helped me to find the truth of who I was. And that's why that subtitle is The Spiritual Guide to Prioritizing Internal Truth Over External Influence. Because I spent the first 36 or 37 years of my life looking out to what everybody else told me I should be doing, rather than looking inwards to understand what I needed and wanted to do from a soul level. And and the book really came from that part of the journey, and looking at somebody actually read the book, and well, a lot of people have read the book, but one of the bits of feedback I got was that she said, I expected it to be more of your story. And I kind of went, well, I'm not the main focus of it. I've got client, examples in there. I've got, because I'm choosing the best idea of how I can illustrate the best way that this works for people. And so I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about the tools and techniques that helped me find myself. Because realistically, I can't remember who the quote is, but it goes something along the lines of, about returning to your home, you're the one you've been waiting for. And that was
Wow.
so true for me.
Yeah.
I was the one I was waiting for. And yet here was me looking for somebody else to fix my life, but I had to do it. I had to go within. I had to work out all of that conditioning that was sitting there. And I had to work out whether I wanted to keep acting and reacting and behaving through that conditioning, or whether I wanted to find new ways of being. And that was really what kind of came through. And interesting, because the book had been in my head in one way or another for about 5 years before I started writing it. Once I created that container to actually go, the book's coming out now, it took 5 weeks for me to get the manuscript out of me. It literally just
Impressive.
poured out. So yeah, it was ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Very impressive. Did you find that, and I always love talking to other writers and asking them this question, did you find the writing process to be kind of cathartic for you and therapeutic as well as you were, putting it on paper?
It was a really interesting one, actually. The first 4 weeks, yeah, it brought up some stuff for me. I knew that part of the reason it took so long for my book to come out was I knew that I needed to get to a place where it wasn't, he did this and she did this. And I didn't want to have any of that energy in the book.
Right.
I wanted to be able to speak with grace and love and dignity. And so even the way that I've crafted the stories that are about me, I've removed the blame, I've removed the comments, the little snarky bits that I knew would have crept in if I'd written it before.
Right. Right.
And so it was quite a peaceful process for me, actually, because I realized how far I'd come with my healing, that I actually did truly feel love for everything I'd experienced. And that last day of writing, I still had about 12,000-ish words to go, and my body woke me up at 4:30. And I'm like, I just want a little bit more sleep. It's like, no, get writing. And I did. I just got up and I started writing, which was Amazing. I stopped to take the dog for a walk and I came straight back. And I think handed it all to my editor around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But my body had just gone, and I wrote 12,000 words that day.
Wow.
It just poured out of me. And it was interesting with the first bit because I expected that, it would be quite a logical way that I'd write it because I had an idea and I had about 5 book plans to work to. But I'd do a little bit in this chapter and then I'd go and jump over here and I'd do this bit of story and then I'd come back and do a bit more here. And so I was really jumping around, but I just trusted that whatever was coming out was the way it was supposed to happen. So I really trusted that process and that journey. But it was funny because I handed it all to my editor on the Tuesday, and then I had this massive realization: oh my God, I didn't write about this, and I do this in almost every client session. So another 4,500 words went to her on the Thursday. And then on the Monday, I wrote a bit more and handed it through. It was another 1,500 words or something. And I went to her, I promise everything else now is for the next book. I'm not handing you anymore. I'm not going to be that writer. And so there was some stuff that I handed her on the Monday, that 1,500 words that didn't make it in. And I think there was a bit from the Thursday as well. But we're like, we'll park those for the next one. But it was a beautiful process in so many ways. But the interesting part was my editor struggled to edit it to start with. We had to have a couple of clearings and conversations for her because it was bringing stuff up for her.
Right.
And in so many ways, that was a beautiful confirmation for me that the book was doing what it needed to do. So she was going, oh, this was a bit of a struggle for me to edit. And then
Right.
we'd have to work through that little bit. So it was, beautiful confirmation in so many ways.
Wow. That's great. So we're just about out of time. Before I get to
Yeah.
my final question, anything that you want to cover that we haven't?
No, look, I think for the main thing, if my biggest thing for people is to start looking at their internal compass, to start really turning in before they look out and look at all the shiny, noisy external things, before they're asking, survey monkeying everybody who, around them for what they should do. We always know the answer to our questions. I knew very early on that my marriage was not healthy for either of us. It had started turning out that way. I knew that deep down. Now, if I had left then, I would have avoided a hell of a lot of pain for all of us. And I knew that answer, but I couldn't act on it. I didn't act on it. And I know why I didn't now. Obviously, with hindsight, I needed that experience. But we know those answers deep down. And what we do is we tend to trust our lies, our self-lies, over our truth. And the more I think we can tap into our internal knowing, even if it's our job, how many people go, oh God, I hate my job. My boss is this. What they're actually wanting somebody to do is go, you need to leave that. And here, I'll write the letter for you. And here, I'm going to help you find another job so that you're not worried about, money or whatever it is. People will stay in a shitty job because they're afraid they're not going to get another one, or they're in scarcity. But if we trust that internal knowing, there is always something better. And that's so important for us to live the life we're meant to live.
Yes, definitely. So, if anybody wants to reach out to you, how do they find out more information? How do they get a copy of the book? Where can they find Amanda Kate on the internet?
Yeah, well, the easiest place is www.amandakate.com.au. I have my book for sale there and all the rest of it, but my book is also on the Kindle store. It is also, I think, on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, perhaps in the US. It's on a couple of book sites over in Australia as well, and throughout the world, I believe, although I haven't done too much searching to find out where it is. But if you Google Divine Messy Human, it should come up. I'm also on, Facebook and Insta and TikTok and LinkedIn and all those things. So, but most of those links are on my website. So if you go on the website, you'll be able to find all the other ways to contact me. But yeah, I do all of the socials. I just don't do them all consistently because
Right.
there's only one of me. So,
Yeah.
I'll do a bit on LinkedIn and then I'll do a YouTube video and then I'll go and do a little bit of time on this one. And, you know, I'm there, just not consistent.
Right. Right. Got it. All right. So that brings me to my final question. And
Yeah.
as you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that Amanda Kate does to make the world a little bit better place.
I hope I'm allowed to say this, but every day I just wake up and try and be a little bit less of an asshole than I was yesterday.
You are allowed to say that, and that's
Yep. Every day I just try and be a little bit better, a little bit kinder, a little bit, and not just to other people, by the way, to myself as well.
yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, it's like, you know what? Can I just a little thing, a bit nicer to myself, a bit nicer to other people, a bit, yeah.
that's perfect. And I really appreciate you taking the time and having the conversation. And for folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. You can pick up a copy of my most recent book there as well, Journey My Mother's Son, Volume 1. And again, thank you very much for the time. Really appreciate it having me on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for the work you're bringing into the world. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. Appreciate it.